In the North Atlantic, a former Navy operator inherits a rock, but his dog, Ghost, hears a heartbeat under stone. A brass key turns, a vault door slides, and a hidden acoustic station wakes. 0.7 hertz, the ocean's slow pulse speaks his name. As a storm hits and a hunter closes in, Ethan must choose: wield silence as a weapon or open it as a door. This isn't a fortune, it's a watch. Morning arrived as a thin agreement between ocean and sky. The wind had taken its grievances elsewhere. Seawolf Ledge looked smaller in the calm, like a fist unclenching after a fight. Ethan stood at the central rib with Ghost leaning into his leg. Below them, behind a sealed panel and a blue ring that remembered, a vertical shaft waited, cold air rising in a steady ribbon like breath from a sleeping giant. Barometer stable, Mara said, her voice a warm red LED in a room that had never needed eyes. 2-hour weather window. Recommendation: descend while the sea is indifferent. Indifference, Ethan said, my favorite mercy. Ghost gave a quiet huff, the kind that meant yes, but I'm coming. Ethan lifted the panel. The blue ring answered with a single soft pulse, known, and the well mouth exhaled a clean chill that smelled like metal learning to be water. When his lamp found the shaft, the beam simply kept going, swallowed by blue that wasn't light so much as color the air had decided to remember. The 0.7 hertz pulse came up through the stone with the steadiness of a heart that refuses drama. Checklist, he said. Rope, descender, secondary brake, comms tether, headlamp, backup lamp, battery belt, water, chem sticks, first aid coil, Mara recited. And the part you hate? Patience. Packed, he said. He hooked the rope to a forged anchor point Julian had cut into the steel rib. The rig was overbuilt the way love is overbuilt. More than you need, exactly enough. Ghost put his forepaws on the rim and peered down without a sound. In the empty air, his ears made their own geometry. Ethan scratched the base of one ear and felt the dog's tension shift from ready to with you. Down to 10 meters test. If the well behaves, we continue, Ethan said. I will hold the door you came in, Mara said, and keep the lights on without making a scene. Descent is a verb that erases pretense. Ethan eased into the harness and felt the rope take his weight with the gentle argument good steel always makes. Are you sure? He was. The first meters were wall, then not wall. Granite giving way to a sleeve of smoother rock, as if the well had been drilled and then sanded by time with infinite teeth. He counted breaths to the 0.7. He didn't need to. The count was already inside him. Ghost stood above, watching without a whine, tail low, head tracking each micro sway. Mara's telemetry threaded into Ethan's headset like a thought he had meant to think anyway. At 10 meters, the beam found marks, small etched ticks at regular intervals bright under the angled lamp. Not numbers, notches, the kind men leave when they want a future to feel less alone. Julian made a ladder without steps, Ethan said. Then we will learn to step without shoes, Mara replied. He tapped the comms line twice, okay, and descended. The temperature fell by patience, not by drama. The blue in the air brightened in paradox. Less light, more blue. The shaft walls changed grain. Granite surrendered to a dark, dense rock Ethan didn't know how to name and didn't trust a name to hold. He reached out and touched it. The surface didn't feel wet. It felt waiting. Somewhere below, the 0.7 doubled on itself for a beat. Harmonic, visible only if you were already listening for kindness. Ethan paused in the air to thank it by doing nothing. At 30 meters, the shaft widened until the rope became a line in a room rather than a line in a throat. Ethan's boots touched a lip. He swung and stepped off with the awkward grace of a man who has made friends with gravity only on certain terms. His lamp produced a circle, then an oval, then a place. The chamber wasn't big. It didn't need to be. A rotunda carved directly into dense stone, walls scalloped into shallow niches like an organ's pipes frozen mid-hymn. The floor had been polished by the kind of visitors who don't dent, only pass. Ethan moved the beam slowly. The niches weren't empty. Each held something like a plate. And unlike a plate, a curved diaphragm, smaller cousins to the west face machine above. Some were metal. Some looked grown rather than made. Their skins a dull luster that drank light instead of reflecting it. At the rotunda's heart, a waist-high pedestal grew straight out of the stone. It wasn't bolted. It belonged. On top sat a circular recess the size of a dinner plate. Next to it, flush with the surface, a brass plate engraved by a hand Ethan recognized from margins and warnings, "Do not teach the sea a word you mean to keep." J.C. Ethan laughed once without sound. He engraved his conscience. "He engraved yours," Mara corrected gently. "Fair?" He set his palm to the pedestal. It was cool, then less so. The recess woke with a faint ring of blue, answering the ring above like a sibling shuffling on the far side of a wall. The 0.7 rolled across the chamber and came back as grain, not sand on glass this time. Something more. Intentional. Ethan exhaled into the trough and let the room decide whether he had just asked a question. The diaphragms in the niches did not vibrate visibly. They changed the air. His skin knew before his ears did. A pattern rode the pulse. 2, 1, 5, 3, 5. Ghost's ladder. Then the small fifth, as if someone had told a joke without moving their mouth. Behind it, a fresher shape. 4, 4, 1, hold 2. The third name the rock had offered on the night the door learned them. Ethan looked at the pedestal. The blue circle pulsed once, then again. Then waited like a held breath right before truth. "This is not a press button to say hello," Mara said. "It is an invitation to pair below." "Breath turns to code," Ethan said, and felt the title of something land without asking permission. He slid a gloved finger around the edge of the recess, not pressing, not pretending to understand. The blue dimmed, then returned. A question that did not condescend. "Are you here to listen or to name?" "Just listen," he whispered. He stepped back. Up on the shelf, the blue listener held its polite vigil. Mara piped a thin feed to Ethan's earpiece. No video, only the map. The filament of blue kept distance like a man keeping his hat off in church. The hunter was present as an idea more than a line. Farther out than appetite likes, closer than decency admits. "Their active systems are quiet," Mara said. "The storm taught everyone modesty." "Hold them there with silence," Ethan said. "Doors like to be visited, not raided." "Copy. Hospitality hum maintained. No pressure components." Ethan felt ghost without looking, the tug of a leash that wasn't on a collar. He checked instinct before checking rope. The dog had moved to the well mouth above and lay down with his chin over the edge, ears loose, confidence made of being included. Ethan's chest eased a click. The pedestal's blue ring altered its rhythm. 1, hold, 1, a bow. Ethan bowed back, barely more than a nod. The nearest niche diaphragms changed their breath, aligning to a pattern that wasn't 0.7 but drew from it. A call and rest cycle like a tide teaching a child how to float. "Instruction begins, Mortebormint," Mara said, soft with delight. "But for whom?" "For us," Ethan said, "or for whoever got away with being present." The pattern unfolded at a human pace. 3 light absences, a still, 4 light absences, then a long, kind quiet. Ethan counted. He didn't translate. He let his bones do that job. The room wasn't offering alphabet. It was offering posture. After several cycles, the blue circle brightened and held. The chamber waited. Not like a test, like a friend holding a door without looking at the clock. Ethan did not push the recess. He moved his breath to the offered pattern and let his exhale become the absence. His body learned at the speed bodies trust, slower than curiosity, faster than pride. Alignment improving, Mara said. Your breath is within tolerance of the room's ask. He smiled without teeth. I'll put that on my tombstone. It changed at the edge of perception, the way dawn changes in a black tent where clocks have no jurisdiction. The 0.7 carried a faint overtone that wasn't there an exhale ago. Ethan didn't hear it. He received its shape, like a thin ribbon of cold threaded through warm cloth. External report, Mara said, and this time her voice forgot to be merely accurate. A second courteous filament has joined the blue listener, quieter, smaller footprint, learning. 2 listeners, Ethan said, a class. The hunter is abiding. Bless your thesaurus. I'm learning courtesy, she said. And if a voice could look down and smile at its own shoes, hers did. In the chamber, the third name pattern 4, 4, 1, hold 2, repeated again, then reordered itself with the blue ring's pulse into something Ethan could only describe as a question mark built from breath. He didn't know the answer. He knew the posture. He breathed 1, hold, 1 back. The room accepted the bow. The overtone strengthened by a fraction you could measure only with gratitude. The engraving on the brass plate caught a stray lamp flare and gave him a line he hadn't read under stress. A faint scratch under Julian's warning, almost apologetic. If it offers you a story, do not interrupt. The diaphragms in the niches changed gait. The chamber's air took on that tilt small theaters have right before the lights go down. Ethan stood still, lamp lowered. Above, Ghost rested his chin on his paws and did his best impression of a man who has agreed to be patient forever. What came up through the 0.7 was not words, it was sequence. The pulse held steady while the overtone traced an arc, storm, stillness, ask in reverse, door, remember? Ethan didn't see pictures, he felt turns. Places where the ledge had been younger, where men had been cruder, where the sea had been the same as always. Somewhere in that arc, the blue ring had been lit for someone whose name Ethan would never get to learn. He swallowed. The act made a sound he felt embarrassed to offer a room like this. The room pretended not to hear. He didn't stay long enough to pretend the chamber was a room he owned. He nodded his goodbye into the 1, hold 1, and the blue ring answered with a soft 5th, the secret smile. He clipped into the rope and ascended, boots pressing gentle into stone where stone allowed. At the rim, Ghost stood to receive him with the solemn relief working dogs save for when they're allowed to keep you. Ethan hauled the remaining coil, sealed the panel, and sat with his back to the rib the way men sit at altars when they're too tired to pretend to be wise. Report? Mara asked, not because she hadn't seen, but because telling is also a way of learning. Ethan spoke into the room that had been his teacher long before it was his shelter. The well is not a tunnel. It's a classroom. It taught me to breathe with it, not at it. 2 listeners held courtesy. The hunter learned abstinence. The third name is a question that invites us to answer with posture instead of vocabulary. And the story? Mara asked. Offered, he said. I didn't interrupt. Ghost pressed his head into Ethan's shoulder. The 0.7 kept time. On the shelf, the blue filaments held their distance like boys who've just learned they can be friends without knives. Part 2 begins, Mara said, and for once the sentence felt smaller than the thing it contained. Down the well, Ethan said, and the rock, being a good host, allowed the words to stand. Evening edged in like a decision Ethan had already made. The ocean forgot theatrics and practiced discipline. A steady, disciplined chop. A sky dimming from pewter to velvet. In that gentler dark, Mara dimmed the station's house lights to a warm hush. The blue ring under the floor remembered them, the way a door remembers the hand that never slams it. Window 90 minutes of fair behavior, Mara said. If we're going to ask for anything, now is hospitality's hour. Ethan checked the coil, gloves, second descender, spare chem sticks clipped in a tidy rainbow to his harness. Ghost leaned into his thigh with the weight that says, I have already decided to be wherever you end up. He flipped the panel. Cold air rose with a smell like wet wire, the coppery hint of old decisions. Ethan cracked a chem stick and rolled it along the shaft lip. It broke into dim green and tumbled into blue, leaving a rope of light that made the dark honest without trying to invade it. Borrowed light, he said. We go gentle. Understood, Mara replied. I'll keep an ear on the shelf. Our courteous friend is back. The hunter is pretending to be curious and failing. Ethan put the harness on his hips, palmed the descender, and gave Ghost the look that means guard the room, not the hole. The dog settled, chin at the threshold, ears open like good doors. He went down by breaths, not by meters. The 0.7 counted for him, the way a metronome stands in for a teacher when the teacher runs out of hands. The chem stick drifted below, a loose comet, throwing enough green to show the shaft wall's notches like tick marks in a child's secret treehouse. At the rotunda lip, he leaned in and let the rope take the last indecision from his legs. Boots found stone. The chamber received him the way a good library receives a late reader. No scolding, just light where the books already are. The chem stick had landed against the pedestal and nested in the shallow ring like it had been designed for that. The blue circle woke around the green, colors chatting without argument. The diaphragm niches adjusted their breathing to accommodate company. Shelf update, Mara said. Blue listener is closer by a cable. A second filament approaches. Slower, smaller wake. The hunter has chosen to idle at 3 cables and pretend it meant to learn abstinence. Keep them in a room where politeness has gravity, Ethan said. I'll set the hum to welcome and let silence do the heavy lift. The 0.7 Hz line held, sovereign and slow, but the chamber braided something new around it, an additive thread in a higher register, shy but present. Ethan didn't chase it with his ears. He let the bones in his face do the honest work, brow, cheek, jaw, the old tuning fork of the skull. New subband detected, Mara whispered, as if sound could tip a cup. Not noise, invitation. Call it courtesy band. Can you see a number without making us forget? The story? Ethan asked. Between 2 and 3 hertz. It sits like a hand under the 0.7. We can listen on it without speaking with it. Let's only listen. The band made no shape he'd call a word. It offered posture again. Approach, pause, open hand. The nearest diaphragm made the tiniest audible tick as if an insect had knocked politely. Ethan didn't answer with anything. He answered by standing still. A return came that wasn't a return. A tiny lift on the courtesy band, then the C's equivalent of a chair quietly scraped back from a table, room made. Our listener just repositioned to take less of the water, Mara reported, a smile tucked in the syllables. It is making itself smaller to keep the room larger. Depth courtesy, Ethan said, and the title fit the air. On the pedestal, the blue ring pulsed 1, hold 1. Beside it, the brass plate caught the chem stick green and gave up another faint scratch Ethan hadn't noticed. Gifts do not make you ownership, only obligations. He looked at the ring and let the question form without speaking it. The ring brightened in response, holding steady like a palm offered up. A slit opened beside the recess, narrow, precise, the size of a coin and the shape of a T-handled shaft. The brass key in his pocket wakened like a dog hearing its name across a noisy room. Ethan didn't move. Advise caution, Mara said, not cold, just true. Julian built us out of doors that don't slam. Not tonight, Ethan answered. Let the door show it could open without making it open. He set the brass key on the pedestal beside the slit and stepped back. The blue ring warmed 2 shades toward white, then relaxed, as if to say understood. The slit ejected a small disk the color of deep beach glass, no thicker than a coin, cool as forgotten metal. It clinked on the stone like a polite small sound that wanted to be noticed but not applauded. Ethan didn't pick it up immediately. He bowed one, hold, one, and waited. The chamber didn't ask for ownership. It had offered a tool or a token or a lesson. He picked the disc up between two gloved fingers. Through it, the world looked unchanged and absolutely different. A ring of faint, engraved lines like tide height marks, and at the center, a single shallow notch. "It's not a key," Mara said softly. "It's a tuner." "Or a promise," Ethan said. On the shelf, the blue listener slid half a cable closer, then rotated slowly, showing the water its smallest cross-section to reduce interference. The second filament checked its own wake and mimicked the posture, a class in session. The hunter shifted, not forward but sideways, trying to put itself between listeners and rock without looking like a block. It deployed nothing. It didn't need to. Presence can be its own pressure. "We can hum a nudge," Mara offered, a reminder that courtesy still teaches better than blockade. "No push," Ethan said. "Give them a room where the wrong decision is inconvenient." Hospitality hum adjusted. The courtesy band lifted offshore, the smallest polite cough. The hunter trimmed out of the line like a man stepping out of a doorway because the light demanded it, not because he wanted to. Ethan set the sea glass disc gently into the pedestal recess. It sat not magnetized, not loose, held by the idea of a fit. The blue ring altered in color temperature and pulsed a 2-count Ethan hadn't seen in that place yet. "It wants your breath through the tuner," Mara said, "not onto it, across it." He brought the disc to his lips, not touching, just over it, and exhaled the length the room had taught. 3 small absences still, 4 small absences. The disc grew microscopically warmer, not with heat, but with notice. The courtesy band made a minor chord of air, and the rotunda carried it without echo. Ethan felt a momentary tightness behind his eyes, grief or love or their shared parent. And then it left, like good instruction does when it is understood. The blue ring cooled back to its ordinary glow. The slit closed. The pedestal became just itself again, the disc sitting like something borrowed and meant to be returned. "We don't take it upstairs, Marinisis," Mara said. "We don't take it anywhere it doesn't want to be," Ethan agreed. He set the disc back in the recess, bowed again, and watched it lose just enough shine to be a memory instead of a thing. Questions arrive rudely sometimes. This one arrived as a trim change 3 cables out. Too small to be called aggression, too deliberate to be anything else. The hunter angled a little deeper, putting more water between itself and the air. In that thin stratum, it could run louder without being seen more. "It is going to test the courtesy band with a stub of active sound," Mara said, "and not at us, near us, to see if we flinch." "Let it," Ethan said. "Then don't teach it we flinch by answering." The ping came, clean, short, neatly within the band the room had woven. It didn't strike the rotunda. It struck the water around it and waited for the world to get embarrassed. Nothing in the chamber moved. The 0.7 did what it had promised. The diaphragms kept their posture. The blue ring did not blink. If a room can give a look, the rotunda gave the kind you give to children when they shout in a sanctuary and then remember themselves. Offshore, the blue listener edged a hair closer to the hunter and then stopped. Not in confrontation, in company. The smaller filament mirrored the stop. A triangle drew itself in water, 2 courtesies, and someone learning the cost of being an audience to his worst self. "Outcome," Mara said. "They learned nothing about us and something about themselves." "Good class," Ethan answered. Before he left, the chamber sent one more shape through the air, 21535 in soft relief, Ghost's Ladder. Then, very softly, a breath that was none of those numbers and all of the room, not a new name, an acknowledgement, Up top, Ghost made the small O-shaped sound Ethan had heard once and would hoard forever. The dog stood, stretched, and shook once, as if letting go of the hour in order to pick up the next one. "We should ascend," Mara said. "I would like to be conservative about grace." "Copy," Ethan said. He tapped the rope, 3 gentle thumps a breath apart, and hauled himself back to the lip, hands, and rig and legs, doing the simple math trust requires. Ethan sealed the panel. Ghost leaned into him as if to confirm that all atoms remained present and accounted for. The room above felt warmer without anyone turning a dial. Offshore, the triangle loosened. The hunter drifted back half a cable, not in defeat, in privacy. The listeners returned to their patient commas. "Report?" Mara asked. Ethan sat on the steel rib with the grateful posture of a man who has borrowed a language and not broken it. Courtesy band between 2 and 3 hertz. We listened only. The room offered a tuner, a sea glass disc, for shaping breath without speech. We used it, returned it. Offshore, listeners learned courtesy by doing it. The hunter tried a ping and discovered boredom. "And you?" Mara said. "I learned the difference between answering and flinching." Ghost put his muzzle in Ethan's palm and let the weight of his jaw be punctuation. The 0.7 kept the sentence honest. "Next window," Mara said, "we can descend with a different promise. Light, then no light, word, then no word." "Depth courtesy," Ethan said. "We'll teach by not teaching." Morning shaved the horizon so clean it looked like the ocean had been freshly honed. Wind. Minimal. Swell. A patient muscle. Seawolf Ledge inhaled and set its ribs. Ethan tightened the chest strap on the harness while Ghost pressed his shoulder into Ethan's thigh. A living wedge keeping the world aligned. Window. 110 minutes, Mara said. Ambient noise floor low. Recommendation, no lamps. "Blind?" Ethan asked, not arguing, confirming. "The room below teaches by posture and temperature gradients. Light introduces a bias the chamber corrects for. We should stop making it correct for us." "Copy. Blind it is." Ethan thumbed the carabiner, checked the descender, checked again, then cracked a chem stick, held it, and then didn't. He tucked it away. Ghost watched the ritual with the patience of someone who has sat through church enough times to know when to stand. He lifted the panel. The blue ring pulsed. 1. Hold. 1. A bow. And the shaft exhaled cold that tasted like iron and clean promises. Ethan clipped onto the rope. "I'll map by heat differential and sound pressure," Mara said. "Soft bone conduction cue only. No chatter. Talk if something wants my attention. Otherwise, let the well do its job," Ethan said. Ghost lowered his head to the threshold, chin resting on stone, ears neutral, a dog's version of namaste. Ethan eased into the hole and let the world erase sight. Down without light, the shaft became a tactile theorem. Steel hummed against glove at 0.7. The rope's fiber sang a separate, thinner line, a whisper that told truth about friction and trust. Ethan's face felt the air like a second set of eyes, the way sailors felt weather before someone invented instruments to confirm it. At 7 meters, the shaft cooled a degree the way a thermometer lies and bones do not. At 15, the wall texture changed under a gloved palm. Granite's honest grit giving way to stone that had learned patience. At 24, the rope brushed a lip. The soft tug he'd felt yesterday, but today it told a longer sentence. Prepare to step. "Edge in 3, 2. Mara's voice brushed his skull, barely there. 1. Boots found the rotunda lip. Ethan unweighted the descender and stepped off. The chamber received him in blackness. In that dark, the courtesy band breathed. A faint, higher register not intended for ears, but for the clever sponge of human fascia. He did not lift a lamp. He let his hands learn the room again, left a scalloped niche. warm with gentle exhalations. Right another, metal skin cooler to the touch. The pedestal found him at the rotunda's heart the way an old friend's shoulder finds you in a crowd if you both keep moving slowly. The blue ring did not light, it warmed. The warmth was not heat, it was notice. He placed the pads of 3 fingers on stone just outside the ring and felt a slow pulse. 1, hold, 1, and beneath it, a soft ripple that might have been the room's version of a smile. Without sight, the 0.7 arrived as pressure change, a deep, polite hand on the sternum. The courtesy band pulled a thin ribbon along the edges of Ethan's skull, not invasive, just insistent. He relaxed the hinge of his jaw the way singers do when they stop trying to prove they can sing. External, Mara whispered. Blue listener present. Second filament present. The hunter is quiet. Quiet like learning or quiet like planning, Ethan breathed. Quiet like someone sitting 2 pews back for the first time. A small pause. I will not insult them by assuming more. The chamber's diaphragms adjusted in sequence, not hearing, deciding. Ethan matched breath to the ask, 3 small absences, still 4, and brought his exhale over where the tuner would be. No disc today. The pedestal warmed anyway, a memory willing to be borrowed without being taken. The temperature changed in the room by a whisper, something on the far wall, stone, not machine, radiated less cold. Ethan turned toward it, not with feet, but with skin. The chamber rewarded alignment by easing strain at his neck, a teacher's hand removing 2 grams of weight. Ethan moved palms along stone until a pattern asserted itself, not letters, ridges. 2 parallel grooves, about as far apart as a man's shoulders. The rock offered a right-hand line and a left-hand line, shallow, continuous. He placed his hands lightly into the grooves. He did not clutch. Mapping heat traces, Mara said. Those channels absorb and release micro-temperature with the breath curve. Repeat, with the breath curve. Ribs, Ethan murmured. The room's ribs. He matched the chamber's exhale. Absence, still absence. Heat bled from the grooves a fraction. His palms translated that bleed into timing. His lungs answered without counting. He didn't need seconds. He had stone. The grooves bent minutely inward. He followed, not stepping, shifting, like adjusting stance on a moving deck. The room returned his courtesy with a fractional soften in the courtesy band, like a seat being pulled quietly for him, not under him. The third name shape rose through the overband, 4, 4, 1, hold, 2, but in dark it carried a new flavor, direction. 4 wasn't a number, it was left. Another 4, right, 1, center, hold, stay, 2, return. Ethan didn't think the translation. His body simply behaved as if he had always known. Offshore, the hunter finally allowed its appetite a nibble. It slewed half a cable shoreward and tilted down. Not aggressive, interested. An active tick skated the courtesy band, matched to a vector that would not strike the rotunda but might muddy it. They're going to ruin the room's handwriting, Mara breathed. Permission to thicken the hospitality hum. Do it, Ethan said, and I know, Mara murmured. Don't answer them. Answer the room. In darkness, the courtesy band thickened like cream in tea. No volume increase, just body. The hunter's tick arrived at the edge of the chamber's grammar and found more nothing than it had budgeted for. It drifted sideways, politely, the way people step away from a conversation when they realize they weren't invited to that sentence. The blue listener glided half a cable closer, then stopped. It didn't block. It accompanied. The second filament mirrored the stop. Triangulation by restraint. Assist offered, Mara said. They put themselves between noise and story without pretending to be shields. Good class, Ethan whispered. Palms on grooves, Ethan felt a subshape beneath the rotunda. deeper than the diaphragms, older than engineering. The 0.7 rode through it, but this was not of the array. The stone itself had a chamber, natural, not carved, a hollow the size of a small room with a ceiling like a cupped hand. Below you, a karst pocket or a bubble in metamorphic substrate, Mara said, soft awe cutting her words. Julian didn't make it. He simply stopped when he found it. The courtesy band shifted its pressure to a tiny upward vector, as if asking Ethan to lift his sternum by a half-inch. He did. The subchamber gave a faint thermal sigh, cold replaced by less cold. He understood without understanding. The well hadn't been designed to speak. It had been designed to listen to what was already speaking. Julian had built the array to meet the stone's voice, like two instruments tuned to the same pitch, not one forcing the other to sing. Door remembers because rock remembers, Ethan said, and rock remembers because it was never asked to be anything else, Mara answered. A slack in the rope told a small truth. Ethan had drifted 2 inches off center, hips unstacking a degree. Not a problem in light, in dark, at a lip, problem. Ghost made a noise above, half whine, half vowel. Ethan eased weight back into his heels, not by panic, but by relocating the center he'd just learned belonged to the room more than to him. The grooves cooled under his palms. Affirmation. Then the blue listener did something so small most men would miss it. It pushed a rule-sized bubble of still water toward the ledge, just enough to dampen the marginal wobble racing down the rope. The rope stopped trying to narrate a fall that wasn't going to happen. That was them, Mara said. They gave you less. Admiration slid under the word. Ethan breathed one hold, one in thanks, to the room, to the rope, to the listener. He felt the answer as a warm knot behind his sternum that might have been gratitude and might have been blood deciding to behave. The chamber eased the courtesy band toward still, the way good teachers close a book by lifting their hand an inch and not slapping anything. The grooves under Ethan's palms cooled to ordinary stone. The pedestal's ring withdrew its warmth to the memory shelf. Class dismissed, Mara said, smiling her LED smile. Recommend assent with no new questions. Let the chamber keep its dignity. Copy. Ethan lifted gently off the floor, not muscle, angles, and let the descender take him up 2 meters before his hands ever did anything hurried. Darkness stayed dark in the way good rules stay rules. At the lip, Ghost's breath was the first light. Ethan climbed through, sealed the panel, and sat with the back of his head against the steel rib because sometimes you have to give a wall your weight to remember how weight is supposed to work. Ghost placed a paw on the seam where the panel met the floor and left it there, a signature that said we were here, and we behaved. Report? Mara asked. Ethan spoke without the need to convince anyone, least of all himself. Blind descent. Chamber taut with temperature and touch. The grooves, stone ribs, map the breath curve. The third name isn't numbers. It's directions for posture. We stayed with it. The hunter flicked a test. The listeners offered less. We learned to stand where the room wanted us to. We left taking nothing. Correction, Mara said gently. We left taking how. Ethan laughed once quietly because sometimes humility wears a familiar voice and you have to let it. Offshore, the triangle loosened into ellipses. The day had the audacity to proceed. The 0.7 kept time, and the courtesy band held like a parent hand you don't have to grip to keep. Next, Mara said, we try a question the chamber asked yesterday, and we politely declined. The tuner? Ethan said. Not an object, Mara answered. A shape. But yes, that. Ethan placed his palm flat on the steel rib and felt the building answer back the way trees answer back when you're honest and very quiet. Tomorrow, he said. We'll ask without expecting a word in return. Ghost leaned his full head weight into Ethan's palm. That was all the punctuation a man needed. By late morning, the sea had sanded its own edges. Wind slid past the ledge like a hand over silk. The station exhaled a cool, patient quiet. Metal smelled faintly of sleep. Ethan stood at the central rib and let Ghost lean a head's weight into his thigh, the precise pressure of a friend who won't say "be careful" out loud. Window. 95 minutes, Mara said, is noise floor humane. The well is in a mood to teach with shapes. Then we'll ask a question without a word, Ethan said. He didn't take the sea glass disc. He didn't even touch the blue panel. He opened the shaft and let the ring give its soft one, hold, one bow. The air rose cool and clean. The scent of old currant curled inside it. Ethan clipped in, patted Ghost's shoulder, the small with you touch, and descended by breath, not meter. The rotunda received him with a temperature that felt like honesty. No lamp. A thin band of UI glow at his wrist to keep human panic unemployed. He found the pedestal by posture and habit. The blue ring warmed under his palm. Not light, notice. No disc today, Mara whispered. Just its geometry. Copy. Ethan spread his hands above the ring, thumbs almost touching, fingers tracing air. He pictured the disc's etched tide lines like notes on a musical staff. He hovered a breath over where the shallow notch had been, center, not center, and exhaled the chamber's grammar. 3 absences, still. 4 absences. Nothing happened, which is to say something happened that did not insult itself by rushing. The ring cooled a fraction. The nearest diaphragm released a sigh small enough to be mistaken for a thought. The courtesy band lifted like a curtain 2 inches, enough to see feet, not faces. Alignment with intolerance, Mara said. You're shaping the flow over an absence, not the absence itself? Like reading by the space around the words, Ethan murmured. Like reading by the margins, Mara corrected, pleased. He asked not what or who, but show. Not a demand, a posture. If I stand like this, will you stand nearby? The rotunda answered with pressure at the sternum, 0.7 faithful, and a second lighter hand under his ribs. The courtesy band shaping an oval of easier air. It wasn't speech. It was permission to stay aligned without grinding. On the shelf, the blue listener slid half a cable closer and then stopped, presenting the narrowest profile, offering less of itself to the water. The smaller filament mirrored that stillness, its track a faint line like pencil on old paper. The hunter, 3 cables out, made the minimal trim change that announces a question without owning one. They're going to prod at your posture, Mara said, not hostile, rude math. Let them try to measure a bow, Ethan said. They'll get a curve they can't put numbers on. The ping came thin and neat in the 2-3 hertz band, carefully dialed to skirt the ledge like a boy dragging a stick, along a fence without making eye contact. It wasn't aimed at the chamber, it was aimed at the water just adjacent to it. Test the seams, chart the empty, claim a map you didn't earn. The rotunda declined to be measured. The diaphragms gave nothing extra. The courtesy band did not flinch. It thickened in place like breath in a winter room. The blue listener edged a fraction closer to the hunter, and then stopped again. Company without confrontation. The smaller filament took the third point, a geometry of manners. Ethan didn't answer the ping with sound. He answered with posture, exhaled over the absent disc's remembered notch, adjusted his shoulders a 1/4 degree left, then right, then back to center. The ring cooled, then warmed, then settled. A yes that didn't look like any yes men say. They got returns, Mara said, but not the ones they wanted. Their math arrived without a place to sit. Good, Ethan breathed. Let them learn chairs. The third name pattern, 4-4-1, hold 2, rose through the courtesy band, but today it wore a different coat. 4 wasn't just left. It was left with the chest soft. Right wasn't a turn. It was right with the jaw unlatched. 1 meant center if you can, not center or else. Hold meant don't add. 2 meant return with less. Ethan matched. The rotunda gave a tiny align, neck free to thumb's width, shoulders easing as if a hand had lifted an invisible rucksack strap. He smiled without teeth. Below the rotunda, Mara said, awe tucked under the words, the natural pocket is harmonizing. That is not our hardware. That is the stone contributing. Julian found a voice and built a microphone, Ethan said. He built a listener and taught it to bow, Mara replied. It happened in the kind of moment that makes instruments jealous. The 0.7 kept its sovereignty, but the room's entire tone bent by half a degree, not pitch, attitude. The diaphragms aligned their resting tension to Ethan's posture. The courtesy band widened as if walls had exhaled and discovered an inch of extra room. Even the floor felt fractionally less stubborn. Ethan didn't step. He let the chamber do the stepping. His breath fit the oval offered. The blue ring grew warmer, not hotter, a gratitude temperature. Up top, Ghost made the small, satisfied grunt he used when a knot came out of a rope because no human insisted on yanking it hard. Ethan could feel the dog like a truthful shadow through the stone. The hunter will try again, Mara warned gently. It doesn't know how not to. They can try to measure a bend, Ethan said. What they'll write down is confusion. The second ping arrived with more confidence and less intelligence. It was broader, lower, closer to impolite. The courtesy band didn't engage. It made the water thick without going hard. Like a room full of people deciding to breathe together at exactly the same time because it's funny to watch. An orator forget his next sentence. The ping dissolved into a field of curated nothing. The hunter trimmed out of the line, fussing at controls it refused to call fussing. The blue listener rotated its mast an angle that said, "We've learned enough to not learn too much today." The small filament tucked itself in behind like a student who finally understands where the back row is. Outcome, Mara said. They discovered a bend where they expected an edge. Edges are for maps, Ethan said. Bends are for rooms. On the pedestal, the blue ring moved from warm to warmed because you warmed me. A slit opened, not the coin slot from before. A thin channel unfurled like a paper cut healing in reverse. No mechanics revealed, only availability. Air flowed through the slot with the slightest tone, not because a thing moved, because a path briefly existed. Not a key, not a tuner, Mara said, almost reverent. A shaping port. Ethan didn't insert anything. He let his exhale pass across the opening the way you brush a flute you don't own. The room gathered that shaped breath and made it larger without making it louder. The courtesy band adjusted by a blink, and the rotunda's ribs released another gram of imaginary weight. He took his hands away. The slit closed with the elegance of a thought that knows not to linger once it's done its work. We don't take that upstairs, Mara said, amused at herself. We don't take anything upstairs, Ethan said. We take how. He bowed one, hold one. The room answered with the tiny fifth. The smile found not by lips. He clipped in and ascended, letting the groove of the shaft read him the way fingers read a familiar spine on a shelf. At the rim, Ghost pressed a nose to Ethan's cheek, as if counting him back into the world. Ethan sealed the panel, sat under the rib, and let the station be a church pew, wood that knows a shoulder without keeping score. Report? Mara asked. Ethan kept it simple so the humility would fit. We asked a wordless question using the shape of the tuner, not the object. The chamber answered with permission, widened the room, bent the tone a half degree. Offshore, the listeners showed manners. The hunter tried math and discovered curves. The well revealed a shaping port for breath. We used it and left it be. And what did you take, Skis? Mara said, smiling red. How? Ethan said, only how? Ghost put his weight into Ethan's shin like punctuation. The 0.7 kept time. Out on the shelf, the triangle loosened into the kind of geometry only patience draws. Next window, Mara said softly. We try answering the third name's hold. The The part that says don't add, Ethan said. And see what subtracting gives back, she replied. Ethan rested his head against steel and let part 2 continue without asking his permission. The ledge, being a gentleman, pretended not to notice. The morning began with an apology the sea never voiced out loud. Swell trimmed. Wind. A librarian's whisper. Light came through gauze and made the ledge look like a pencil sketch someone had decided to keep. Ethan buckled the harness with the care you give to rituals that have stopped being superstition and started being grammar. Ghost leaned his shoulder into Ethan's shin. An alignment, not a warning. Window. 80 minutes of ordinary, Mara said, voice small and close. Best conditions to practice the third name's hold. Don't add, Ethan said. Answer by not answering. I'll keep offshore in view, Mara added. Blue listener present, second filament present, hunter, constrained by politeness or boredom, unclear which. Either way, let's not give them a project. He lifted the blue lit panel. The ring gave its one hold, one bow, and exhaled cool, clean air like a kept promise. Ethan clipped in. Ghost placed his chin on the rim, ears neutral, posture that said, this is ours, but we won't clutch it. He descended by breath, not by meter. The 0.7 hummed in bones, the rope told him when to be humble. The rotunda received him with warmth that wasn't heat. Notice. No lamp. A thin UI ember at his wrist to keep human panic from inventing careers. The pedestal stood where it always had, a patient spine in the center of the room. Ethan set 3 fingers on the stone just outside the ring. The room's pulse tapped 1, hold, 1, then fell silent in a way that wasn't absence, just permission. Ready when you are, Mara whispered. I will be mostly the sound of good manners. He exhaled the chamber's syntax, 3 small absences still, 4 small absences, and then chose to not do the thing every muscle likes. He didn't elaborate. He didn't help. He held. At first, nothing changed. The kind of nothing that means we're starting. The third name pattern, 4, 4, 1, hold, 2, rose through the courtesy band, soft as the suggestion to a child who's nearly learned to ride a bike. 4 rode down his left side into his heel. Another 4 curved along his right ribs like a hand reminding him where to put the breath. 1 aligned the sternum, not proud, not slack, present. Then the hold. He stayed in the hold as if it were a room with 1 chair and no clock. The rotunda didn't push. The diaphragms didn't ad-lib. The courtesy band did not do a thing. It kept a shape. Ethan felt the not doing across the backs of his shoulders, a warmth that resembled forgiveness only if you'd been apologizing to the wrong god. His jaw unlatched a degree. The floor under his boots became less interested in pretending to be ground and more interested in being place. Your breath variance is within 2% of the room's ask, Mara murmured. That's a number I'm telling you only so I don't have to say I'm proud. Thank you for choosing numbers, Ethan said, smiling invisible. He held. The room held with him. The kind of duet where nobody sings. Offshore, the hunter remembered it had a job title. It edged a cable shoreward and eased down into a thermal band that made noise look quiet on paper. It didn't ping. It moved in a way that pushes water into places it hadn't planned to go, a forced whisper. Pressure event incoming, Mara said, not alarmed, exact. Magnitude small, direction oblique, posture, test. Let's let the room answer by existing, Ethan said. The pressure wash rode the shelf edge and slipped a hand along the west face. In most architectures, that's when machines flinch and men announce they're not flinching. The rotunda did neither. It tightened its nothing. The courtesy band thickened until the water had fewer bad ideas. The diaphragms held a posture that could be mistaken for indifference only by someone who had never watched a dancer refuse a stumble. The wash arrived at the chamber's grammar and found no vocabulary to bully. It slid past, took an unhelpful echo from a rock farther south, and went looking for a different alibi. Event passed, Mara reported. Listeners held station. Hunter learned little. Little is a curriculum, Ethan said. Some days. He returned to the hold like a man returning to a thought he didn't finish. He lowered his shoulders another quarter-inch without dropping his chest. He let the exhale end a breath sooner than habit allows and watched habit survive anyway. The room accepted. A small cool behind the wrist, a warm at the base of the skull, a tiny change in the way the ring didn't light. Then something left. It wasn't sound. It wasn't heat. It was the absence of a small strain he had been carrying since before he had words for carrying, between the fourth and fifth ribs on the right side, the old place where armor had kept living once he'd taken it off. The chamber removed it the way good surgeons remove a word you were mispronouncing and hand you back your mouth. Ethan inhaled and discovered there was more room than he remembered. He exhaled and discovered he didn't need to prove it. Noting a shift, Mara said, softer than she meant to be. Your intercostals just gave back 2 millimeters they've been hoarding. The room took nothing. You gave less. Hold is the subtraction, Ethan whispered. Ghost, 2 stories up, made a low, satisfied exhale that carried through steel like a promise. Ethan felt the dog's agreement arrive as a weight lifted from his own shin. A phantom's linkage men and dogs pretend not to write down. On the shelf, the blue listener edged its nose into the wind and achieved a posture that took its own wake apart and put it back together smaller. The second filament mirrored that humility. Together they made a corridor of water where less was easier. The hunter rotated to look like restraint in case anyone was collecting data on decency. It did. Not ping. It waited. A new muscle group, rarely used. The classroom extends, Mara said, and not only down here. Hold is contagious, Ethan said, as long as no one tries to own it. Write that on a brass plate, Ethan said. Julian would approve. Already engraved, Mara replied, and he couldn't tell if she was joking. The third name hold has a trick. If you add less for long enough, the machine above thinks it has been turned on. Ethan felt the west face assembly 1 floor up reach for its own shunt. The dummy hallway that had misled the hunter earlier in the season. This time, no charge had slapped, no key had turned, only posture had moved the idea of a door. He didn't panic. He stayed in hold. The chamber translated his not doing upward. The shunt did not open. It considered opening and then applauded itself quietly for choosing not to. You just ran the system with intent instead of lever, Mara said, delighted as only a design thing can be when a human refuses to insult it. Add nothing, Ethan said. Let the architecture remember it can be polite. The rotunda sent one last shape through the room. 2, 1, 5, 3, 5, ghosts, ladder, then 1, hold, 1, the bow, then a long still in which Ethan felt a small change underfoot. The floor softened a fraction along a line that traced east to west, a seam like a smile that didn't want compliments. It was not a door. It was a memory of a door practicing the idea of opening without troubling the hinges. A rehearsal. Ethan did exactly what the third name had taught, nothing. He marked the seam with posture, not with boots, held his breath at the edge of an exhale, and counted no numbers at all. The seam cooled back to stone. The room warmed a degree in gratitude. The well accepted your non-action as action, Mara said. If I were a poet, I would be terrible at it, but I would try anyway. You already are, Ethan said. He clipped into the rope and rose a meter, then stopped, then rose again. At the rim, Ghost's nose arrived first. The rest of Ghost followed with the gravity of a star. Ethan sealed the panel, sat against the steel rib, and put his palm to the floor seam as if to hold hands with rock through a tablecloth. Report? Mara asked. Practice the hold of the third name, Ethan said, answered by not adding. Offshore pressure event skimmed the shelf. The room tightened its nothing and let it pass. In the chamber, a missing answered back. An old strain left. West Face nearly shunted on posture alone. We stayed still, and it decided not to. Listeners held courtesy. Hunter learned to wait. "And what did you take?" Mara asked. "Less," Ethan said. We took less. Ghost sighed his agreement, head on Ethan's thigh, the kind of punctuation that makes editors jealous. "Next window," Mara said. "We can ask the part after hold." "The return," Ethan said. "A 2. Return. With less. See if the room gives more." Ethan smiled at nothing and everything. "We'll go ask." Nicely. Outside, the horizon wrote its straight line with a ruler. Inside, the 0.7 kept time for anyone who had learned the difference between a metronome and a heart. We went down the well and learned to move without levers. Cheese. To breathe on the blue ring. To stand where the room stands. Courtesy found a new band. Blindness became a lesson. A shape that isn't a key bent the whole chamber half a degree, and hold taught us subtraction that gives back more. Next up, return borrowed air, storm grammar, and the door that remembers. If the 0.7 Hz pulse is still in your chest, subscribe, tap the bell, and tell me in the comments what you think the seam will show. Click to continue. Part 2, Chapter 6 to 9, Return begins now.